This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, MICHAEL COVEL. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. My guest today is Lou Kerner. Lou believes, to this day, that crypto is the biggest thing to happen in the history of mankind. He invests in crypto via blockchain coin investors and writes about crypto. He has a strong perspective, and he made me think, and he will surely make you think too. Now, how did I come to meet Lou? One of my guests, who has been a favorite on this podcast, Brad Rotter. Brad, the first investor with Richard Dennis and with many of the turtles, famously came on this podcast in 2013 and said that Bitcoin would essentially be the biggest investment in our lifetime. He was right. He was 100% right. Now, for you buy and holders out there that are saying, oh, hold on, Bitcoin went from 0 to 70,000, now it's at 16,000. That wasn't Brad's point necessarily, but the trade itself, especially from a trend following perspective, was to the moon like no other. And Brad said to me, hey, why don't you have my buddy Lou on? He's an interesting guy. What follows is our interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy this chat with Lou Kerner. I have had a very small amount of Bitcoin over the years. I don't have anything now. Was not a regular participant or anything. Brad Rotter came on this podcast in, I believe, 2013, and Brad said, Bitcoin is going to be the biggest investment ever, something to that effect. This is not really a podcast where people make calls and things like that, but I got to give Brad credit for saying that in 2013, because he surely got it right up until a point, and I guess we're at that point now. And I thought, since he recommended that we should chat, that this would be a great conversation because there's been so many ups and downs.
Just to go back up until a point, how about this point in time? What better investment had you ever had in your life, better than whenever Brad said it in today, even down 75%?
Well, sure. I wasn't fortunate enough to be you at that point in time. So yes, no doubt.
Yeah, no, I didn't buy anything. I didn't see it. I spent a year looking at it in 13, 14, but I didn't see it and didn't buy any. I think one of the downsides of having been an equity analyst is the need to really deeply understand something to invest in it, or at least believe that I deeply understand it.
Which would be the opposite almost of the strategies that I write about. A lot of people have made a fortune in Bitcoin without knowing anything about it. They just rode that trend.
Of course. The older I get, the more I realize just an infinite number of ways to skin the cat.
Exactly. Excuse me if I muff any words that cause you that want to stick the dagger in me, but we are here in early 2023.
The only thing I'm offended by is people who spell CryptoOracle or Crypto Mondays as two words. Other than that, nothing really offends me.
But here we are in 2023 and 2022, seeing at your Twitter, crypto is the greatest thing to happen in human history. You still say it loudly and proudly. Let's do a little bit of an autopsy after everyone watches what happened in 2022. And of course, as you point out, if you were in Bitcoin back in 2013, you're still really happy. How do you even start to unpack where we are now?
I'm pretty macro generally in my thinking. And I start, the most macro view is I have a word that I use to describe the tendency of what I've seen over my lifetime of the market to move from bubble to crash and bubble again. And the word that I use to describe that, and I think it fits it perfectly, is capitalism. Because that's what it does. And that's what it always does. There's some people like you who are traders and who could trade the trends and make a killing. I think what I'm better at is extrapolating between 2 points and for something that's high growth and extending it out 5 or 10 years and saying, oh my God, oh my God.
Let's say, okay, people know a little bit about you. They hear that you've been in this space for a long time, but they've seen the headlines in the last handful of months. And they've seen what I will affectionately call this dopey character, SBF, all over the news, all kinds of trouble.
He looks like Madoff, doesn't he? He looks like a young Madoff.
Yeah, maybe there were some test tubes.
Right, it's the same exact thing. It's nothing new. At least if you lived through Madoff, did you learn anything new from SBF? No, it's the same exact thing. I don't care about SBF. I feel terrible for the people who lost tons of stuff, and that's terrible. And do we need regulations? Everybody's got to decide for myself. How much do I want the government in protecting me? Because the more the government's protecting you, the government's going to hurt you by definition. And everybody's got to choose a point.
I'm completely on your side when it comes to the government's not my friend. I don't perceive them as my friend. They are looking for every way possible to cause my life to have problems.
I don't think they're thinking about your life. I think they're thinking about their life.
That's a fair assessment because, look, I grew up in the D.C. area, and let's face it, everybody in Washington, D.C. has one goal alone, and that's to sit in the power chair. They're not there to do nice things for anybody except to have their power.
Yes, I agree with that. Just Trump was a little more brazen about it.
Let me keep it at SBF for a second, just as a macro character, as you point out, all kinds of parallels to Madoff and everything. How does the crypto industry start to recover? If you have all this venture capital, all of this private equity, all these players that want to get involved, and then you see 2022 unfold, how does the trust start to reassemble?
I don't think it's about trust. I think it's about greed. When people get comfortable that they can make money again, they will dive in hand over fist. That's all. We just need to get people believing, need to get a market turnaround. What makes it turn around? I don't know. Nobody knows when, today, tomorrow, week, a month. I don't believe anybody knows. Maybe the guys who do the trends do. I was a Wall Street analyst for the first third of my career, my last 4 years at Goldman. Since then, I put out 2 price targets. The first was in March of 2010. I put a price target out on Facebook because I saw something and I extrapolated out and go, oh my God, this thing keeps on doing this for another 5 years. And I put $1 million price target on Bitcoin coming up now 2 years ago. Could it be wrong? Obviously, it could be wrong. Nobody has a crystal ball, but 100% of everything I've seen makes me feel more comfortable with that number. When I wrote it, I said, and I know exactly how it's going to get there. It's going to go way up and way down and way up and way down. And in my view, if it's $1 million in 2031, all of that discussion is just noise.
In my world, I can look at trend following traders, guys that have made bloody fortunes, and they've had in their career 60% drawdowns. And that's part of their track record, part of them getting to be the billionaire, so to speak.
I'm a huge fan of Cathie Wood. When I first got into crypto, she was very gracious with her time and just really taught me a lot. And then I watched her wild rise and now her fall, quote, from grace. And she's doing the same exact thing. For a long time, nobody cares. Then she was the smartest person in the world. Then she's the dumbest person in the world. The nice thing, too, about getting older is you get, I think, greater conviction, which doesn't mean, obviously, you can't have your head in the sand because there's nothing constant but change. But the mistake I made in my first startup when I left Wall Street to start a company, we paid the island nation of Tuvalu $50 million for their top-level domain .tv. The mistake I made was I let the market tell me how much my company was worth at the top and at the bottom, and those were both tragic mistakes.
Why do you phrase it as crypto, the greatest thing to happen in human history, versus Bitcoin?
To me, there are a set of technologies that are all happening at the same time that are largely encapsulated by Bitcoin. But that's like, to me, calling Bitcoin crypto and saying they're synonymous is like saying Google and the internet is synonymous. Google's a massive, huge, important thing, but it is not the internet. Crypto or Web3, whatever word you want to use, I think those technologies are going to be as deeply ingrained in our day-to-day life in 20 years as the internet technologies are in our lives today.
I can remember putting up a website in 96. It was interesting, and I made some money and probably lost some money. It was interesting that the dot-com bubble took off, but it didn't affect me because I was using these technologies for my purposes. It was pretty easy to see that things like pets.com were probably not going to make it. Give me, the guy in the elevator that really doesn't know shit, that you're talking to today in 2023, because you got this conviction. I can feel your optimism, but try and paint a picture coming out of the ashes of 2022. I hear you about, okay, we can look ahead 20 years, but can you give me some steps about how it starts to unfold in a positive way? Because right now, other than just acquiring assorted crypto assets and holding on to them, I'm a smart guy. I don't really have a use case for them.
We've got 2 big problems. And one of the most interesting things is while crypto has lots and lots of naysayers. And there are lots of things you could say about crypto that would really, okay, that's a logical thing to say. And given that view, I understand why you're negative. But nobody who's negative says those things, because nobody who actually understands it deeply is highly negative, or you can count them on one hand. Warren Buffett doesn't talk about token economics. He just says it's rat poison. People want to follow that. The problems we have to solve are token economics and governance and consensus if we're really going to be able to have complex organisms decentralized. And that's really what this is all about. We're seeing the early things like the early internet disrupted newspapers. What we're seeing are the very, very early days of the disruption of centralized finance. We've seen Uniswap, which is a decentralized automated market maker. And now if you launch a token, you can start making a market in your own token and probably making money off it. You don't need to go out there and beg somebody and pay them a lot of money to make a market in your stock. And you don't even know what the hell's happening. Once you understand how it works, it's just so much better. And we're already seeing that scale. It got quite big, but then obviously it's shrinking during the current time. There's another great, again, very macro law that gives me great comfort, and that's called Amari's Law. And he was a professor at Stanford when he coined it. And Amari's Law is the fact that the impact of all great new technology is overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run.
You brought up the phrase disruption. And I think the part that I struggle with, and I'm going to let you run with it as long as you want, but the part that I struggle with is I watch the Fed operate over the course of the last decade. I see this zero interest rate policy. I see all this wizardry that they did. I look at things like American Express, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal. These are the entities that will be disrupted if and when crypto wins. They're going to put up a hell of a fight. I can't make a damn prediction on where crypto is going to be or go, but I sure as hell want it to win.
I appreciate that. And look, I'm right there with you. A couple weird things happened before I saw the crypto light on June 29, 2017. And the first one was I became acutely aware of something that I called FAMGA, which was Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon, and their ever-increasing market share of market cap, and how that was great for them and their shareholders, but really fucking bad for the rest of the world. This had been going on for a while already, and it looked to continue to go on forevermore. The only thing that gave me comfort is there's this chart from the magazine The Economist from like 2015, and it shows the market share of market cap of the top 100 public tech companies. And it starts in 1980 when IBM has 80%, and then it falls, and then Microsoft comes and gets 35%, and then it falls, and now Apple has 30%. I mean, you see it over the long arc of time. Okay, there's nothing constant but change. And I think personally, the moment of time, and I've written about this, that I think we are, that I deeply feel, is that we're in a pitched battle for the soul of the metaverse between FAMGA and the community. It feels incredibly like the Death Star versus the Alliance. And most of the time, to your point, the Death Star wins because they're not solving for us. That's what we know. When the Fed goes out and does its magic and saves everybody, well, it does really save everybody? No, it saves the wealthy people. And then they let some trickle down so there's not a revolution.
That's a fair assessment. Let me keep it at that disruption for a second. You brought up the Facebook, Google, Apple, all that stuff. Give me a scenario in your mind to where the U.S. Federal Reserve loses the power to do what they did with zero interest rates for a decade. Give me the scenario where we can get around having to use PayPal and Visa and MasterCard and American Express. Give me a scenario how that can unfold, because they've got a hell of a lot of power and they do not want to lose their seat at the table.
Even going up a little more macro than that, part of why the Fed can do what it does is because the dollar's the global currency. Crypto's going to disrupt that in the near term, but it's doing it, and this is the controversial view, it's not Bitcoin that's going to do it. It's the Chinese central bank digital currency.
Explain that for the audience that might not be aware.
So they've just basically taken the yuan and have made it a digital currency. People get it in a digital wallet, and they have 250 million wallets in January of last year, 2022. I'm sure it's hit bumps along the way. This is complicated stuff. If people are familiar, China's been going around for 20 years on the Belt and Road Initiative, where they've been investing in building ports and tunnels and loaning all kinds of money to countries around the world. really fundamentally, deeply helping these countries build out their infrastructure. The United States isn't doing that. All of that's going to be paid back in CBDC. So this currency is going to quickly be an alternative to the dollar. And I'm pretty sure the whole world wants an alternative to the dollar, because without an alternative, everybody is a slave to the United States and what it wants.
But on the flip side, a digital yuan puts us at the mercy of one particular government and what they might want at any point in time.
Now at least we have two governments.
Okay, two. But you're clearly would prefer a third option.
Yes, no. Both of these are horrible. Both of these are horrible beyond belief. But you talked about what's going to disrupt the dollar and its power. In my view, I think this is coming like a freight truck. I assume the whole world, other than the United States, wants it to come.
How do we get to a point when I see, and I didn't even know who these people were before 2022, they became the poster childs for bad actors in the crypto space. Because look, I follow really interesting guys that are big proponents of crypto like Andreessen, a lot of interesting guys that really are behind crypto. But how do we get to a place to where we can get past acceptance issues in terms of, okay, am I now obtaining a token that's going to be another bad actor? Or from your setup in this conversation, that's capitalism. There's going to be some rocky roads. It's going to be up and down. And it's always been that way.
That's exactly what I feel. It feels to me exactly like the internet. Do you know when the first email was sent?
I know when my first one was sent in 1994, but I know it was before that for sure.
When do you think the first one was sent on what was the predecessor of the internet?
I'm guessing the 50s.
Yeah, you were literally one of the first people who overshot. It was 68. If you ask some Gen Z, they'll say the early 90s. But this was around a long time. And if we take a look at, well, it was around for a long time, then what happened was Mark Andreessen and the browser. And all of a sudden, using the internet became really easy. I mean, that was what started it. And then the number of websites started growing and growing and growing, and nobody cared. And the on-ramp, if you remember, was actually America Online, which was you weren't even on the internet, but you were online. And that was the first little baby step you had to take. Before you went to the internet, you had to get online. Now they're synonymous, obviously. And now this is just the next new technology, and it's coming around. One of my favorite stories of my life experience was I was the biggest streamer of video in 2001 at .tv, because we were reselling Akamai services to broadcasters around the world. Mike told us that we were the biggest streamers. It just looked at us as one entity. But it sucked because the pipes were really slow. And so fast forward 2005, I was running the world's largest social network called Bolt. And now the pipes are fat enough, and I could build it myself where you allow people to upload video and stream it. But there are 3 tiny companies, and I talked to all of them about buying them. And I bought the largest one for $250,000 and 5% of my company. And fast forward a month, we were maybe 3 times bigger than number 2, then but tiny. And somebody uploaded a video called Lazy Sunday, which an Andy Samberg Saturday Night Live video onto the number 2 site. And that day, that site became the fastest growing website in the history of the internet. And 6 months later, Google bought it for $1.5 billion. And that was YouTube. Fast forward 5 years, Chad Hurley emailed me and says, hey, we're having our 5-year birthday party. We'd like to fly you out to San Francisco to tell that story. Because that was the first time we thought, hey, maybe we're a company. Somebody wants to buy us. And so I flew out there and thanked me for coming. I congratulated him on his success, and I couldn't help myself. And I said, hey, Chad, if they had uploaded Lazy Sunday onto Bolt, we would have been YouTube. I laughed really hard. And he said, yeah, of course you would have been. He said, but why would my brother have uploaded it to your site? And I love that story because it tells 2 things. Obviously, it's lightning in a bottle. But it turns out there's a lot you can do to optimize for lightning in a bottle happening to you. And I don't know whether it's today or tomorrow or a year or 5 years or 10 years or never, but I'm betting 100% of my time on the fact that this industry is going to have its Lazy Sunday moment. And I think it's going to be sooner rather than later.
What's really interesting about what you've laid out, okay, we talk about the dollar, perhaps peak dollar, competition. Everybody wants some competition. You lay out the digital yuan scenario. If we can get to a place where crypto, as you imagine it, gives us the ability to have a store of value, a payment mechanism outside of the Fed deciding that they're going to reward XYZ group or punish XYZ group, as has obviously happened in the last handful of years, watching the whole COVID thing unfold. That changes the shape of the world. That changes nation states. Perhaps it invents nation states.
Yeah, well, that's what Balaji says.
Easier said than done.
Sure. Obviously, massively aspirational. For me personally, I have three sons, 19, 21, and 24. And I say, I don't feel responsible for the world as it is, but I do feel weirdly responsible for the world I'm leaving my kids. And I personally think everything is broken beyond repair. The thought of working 5 minutes trying to fix anything just seems to be wasted time. And maybe there's an opportunity to build something new.
Broken beyond repair, meaning
everything, the education system, the healthcare system. I got a divorce. My ex sued me for divorce in April of 17. We're having another court case next month. I don't understand how the state affords it. Seriously. But everything is broken anytime you act with the state.
That's a great point that I've not thought about because, okay, let's use you as an example. I'm not asking for personal details, but you have a divorce. You just bring it up. Okay, it's time to settle. It's time to separate. And the fact that the state is involved and picking and deciding whose assets or what percentage of one's assets get shared or not shared or to what level. Whereas if we had more control, perhaps in the future, more control of our own assets outside of the state, that whole system ends. It's like basically a mafia protection system. I think most people are generally honest people and they want to try to do the right thing, but the state has this extra hand on top of everything that we're all just stuck with.
Exactly. I assume there was a point where the state actually did its job okay. We had a great country for a long time. Up until 2015, I truly believed in American exceptionalism. That's what I was told growing up. And I looked around, that's what I saw. Obviously, I was looking through a certain pair of glasses. And it turns out we're a banana republic like everybody else. And that makes a lot more sense.
It doesn't cause me any grief when you say that because I can look around and I can check the boxes and go, yes, what Lou just said makes perfectly plausible sense because just check the boxes. They're everywhere. But a lot of people don't want to believe that yet. They're still in la-la land. Still trust the system, trust the Fed to tuck them in at night and give them a kiss on the forehead.
I think that view for that person probably works well until it doesn't. I have a better grip on reality than people who believe that. I just have a reality that works for me. I think we all go places for media, and I think they're all lying to you. And I've decided that I'm going to go to MSNBC and the New York Times for my lies, and I'm fine using that construct.
When you say that, do you mean that everything just has to implode and you want to be affiliated with, associated with people, ideas, ventures, et cetera, that can navigate that implosion? Is that what you're saying?
Certainly. I'm not hoping for an implosion or wishing for an implosion. My grandparents lived in Germany and they got their French passport in 1932, just as like a plan B. One day they woke up and they were really glad that they had a plan B. I'm getting my Portuguese passport now for the same reason. My mom was born in France when my grandfather was fighting for the French resistance. So I could have gotten my French passport just by walking in any French embassy before I was 18 and signing a piece of paper. But we grew up thinking, why would we ever want another passport? I believed a lot of things that I don't believe today.
Let me take you back to something you said earlier. You brought up Warren Buffett, the rat poison. I can think of other people that I respect, like Nassim Taleb, Ben Hunt. There are people that if you were to get on stage with them, it's going to be a slug match. Where do you start to explain to them, not that they may or may not listen, but where do you start to explain to them what they're missing, what they're not seeing? Because they make a pretty strong argument that the Buffett direction of rat poison.
For me, when I saw the crypto light, what I saw was for the first time in history, we had a tool set to solve for the community instead of the man in the middle who solves for himself. I believe that to be more true today than I did then. We're still in the early development of these tools. I think what I'm also very excited about is I think they're unstoppable. So obviously, I'd like a friendly regulatory environment in the United States. But my $1 million price target on Bitcoin in 2031 doesn't change based on what the United States does. Google's a massive thing, but it's not a thing in China. So you don't need China to be massive. You don't need the United States to be massive. But it's unimaginable that the United States isn't eventually going to have an accommodating. There's regulatory arbitrage or countries like Singapore and Portugal that are opening their arms and massively benefiting from it.
But ultimately, though, if we were to get to the place where we both could imagine this certain sense of freedom from that invisible hand out there, how does the regulatory environment, that phrase scares the hell out of me because we know what that is. That's a bunch of politicians in DC and they don't want to be on the side that we're talking about in this conversation, do they?
I think there were these same exact conversations around the internet. The internet was the end of the world to a lot of people. Look at all the porn. Look at all the scams. Can't let people go around the internet themselves. The government tells you that you're too stupid to buy shares in a private company because you're not an accredited investor. So why don't you take your money and go down the street and buy a lottery ticket?
Can I tell you, I did a documentary back after the Great Recession, and I actually went to the Virginia government offices where they had the lottery. I was interviewing man in the streets, and I had a guy that I got on film who told me with a straight face he played the Virginia lottery because it was his retirement. That's state-sponsored insanity.
Well, for somebody, it's going to be true.
Well, okay, but yeah, we know the odds there.
It's ridiculous.
It's quite terrible. I'm really glad you brought that up because it's a great point. When you have the state acting like the state is trying to be a good actor and help people, but right in the middle of the state's operation plan is to sell lotteries everywhere, to sell gambling everywhere.
To sell drugs.
It primarily fleeces the people that can least afford to be fleeced.
If you're black and sell drugs, you're in jail. If you're white, you're an essential worker.
Typically spend all my time in Asia. I just came back to my hometown here in Virginia outside DC. And this is a place where they've got multi-million-dollar houses everywhere. And all that exists now are vape shops and massage parlors. This apparently is the new America. Let me shift it to something perhaps a little more positive and a little more speculative. Some of the micro thinkings that you have, for example, ideas or types of crypto companies, given that we're in 2023, after a really interesting year, things that are exciting you now that could be the types of things that could transform our lives in the crypto space.
Getting back to DeFi, one of the companies I'm invested in is taking gig workers, so people who work for Uber, they get paid in 30 days. If they want to, they can go somewhere and get a payday loan. They're going to pay 35%. This company is doing it for 12%, 1%, because it's just for 30 days. And investors are getting 10%. And it's a win for everybody. Investors are getting a great return, very low risk, and gig workers are getting money at much cheaper than they were before. It's just one tiny micro example of how the system can be so much better for everybody.
After seeing so many bad actors in 2022, who are the voices on the crypto side? You're making a hell of a case today, but who are the voices on the crypto side that people should trust?
Should they trust CZ? I don't know. The great thing is you shouldn't have to trust anybody. That's what this is about. I'm a fan of CZ. That's just another centralized thing. And if CZ decided he wanted a rug pull, CZ could rug pull. By the way, public companies can rug pull. So it's not like this is just a crypto thing.
It is interesting that we went from this start of Bitcoin before many of the other tokens and currencies, that we started with this decentralized perspective. But then to bring retail in, we went to this centralized perspective. And the centralized perspective is what blew up in 2022.
But again, the non-regulated, so like Coinbase, you can put your Bitcoin in Coinbase or whatever, and you're going to be okay. Hard to imagine Coinbase would be like, I want to say Bank of America, but I mean, Coinbase is a well-regulated, well-run, well-audited company. So there's definitely awesome solutions for people who want to get in and be centralized.
If I look at that Coinbase stock chart, though, that chart, without understanding the fundamentals, that chart doesn't paint a pretty picture to me.
Overlay it to Amazon's chart. It's exactly the same.
Point. Yes, we are now seeing that. Amazon's down, I think, approximately 50% or a little bit more.
Well, no, I'm saying Amazon 2002 was down 95%. Just because your stock is way down doesn't mean that you're not a good company. That's the whole lesson I learned from running my own company. And again, believing about my own company. I let the market tell me how much it was worth at the top. I let it tell me how much it was worth at the bottom.
Well, you got to have the ability to hang on, though. When the public thinks that you're down 95%, the faith loses fast.
Yes, of course it does, because they never had faith. They just were trying to make a buck, and they weren't making a buck, so they leave. The Amazon business was going straight up and to the right, and it was a straight line up and to the right. But people looked at that same line, and the sun had gone down. People saw darkness.
And it went flat for a long time, too, after the dot-com crisis. There was no great gains there for a long time.
It might have taken a while. I forget how long it took to get back. What, after the Great Depression, it took a long time, 30 years.
Where do you recommend people put their thinking today? keep saying it, but we're coming out of 2022. It's a pretty brutal year for people that were in crypto. Depending on when they got into crypto, fair point, your point. Where do you want them to start their thinking today?
It should be the same thing, I think, in whatever market you're talking about. People should, get a diversified portfolio, and they should invest over time. I'm still investing over time. I've been doing it 5 years, and I'm still investing. I buy Bitcoin every single day.
I'm just pondering that. Explain your process for Bitcoin buying.
I decided when I started buying it, how much my portfolio I felt it comfortable being, and wanted to get into that in over 5 years. And by the way, now I'm continuing to buy more. I'm making it a larger percentage of my portfolio because just more confident. It doesn't have anything to do with the price. When you know that you're buying more today, actually, it makes it going down at the margin a little less painful.
I think the thing that I like about this conversation a lot, which is a good reminder, and you're very good at it, is before somebody wants to walk into the room with the dagger and put the shiv into crypto, is to remind everybody the system that we're currently in and who controls that system. Okay, yes, there's been a tough run here, but what is the other system? And should we all not be excited? Of course, we should want to be excited to escape the chains of that other system if we possibly can.
And weirdly, the only thing that we need to do to have it be a thing is believe it's a thing.
Which is probably hard right now.
Sure, and I get it, but last downturn, we were down to 3,000. Now we're down to 16,000. Each bottom is a higher bottom. Doesn't make it any easier for the new people to get in. These are lessons most people, including myself, have to learn the hard way, unfortunately.
NFTs. Where do you stand on NFTs?
First, to understand what an NFT is. To me, what an NFT is it's the Web3 version of a website over a URL. What's a URL? It's just a pointer telling somebody where to go. That's all an NFT is. It's just a unique identifier of something. Now, the question is, can something be of value? Yes, something can be of value. There will be lots and lots of somethings that will be of value and many that will not be of value, just like anything else. They're going to be transformative and a part of our everyday lives. The weird thing is my kids hate NFTs for whatever reasons. They became very uncool in the gaming industry. I think people hate change. I really don't know why. And then Reddit came out and called them digital collectibles and everybody loved them.
As a guy that's written a bunch of books, I don't really have to say too much about how much I can imagine the benefits of NFTs, assuming it can unfold as described. My gosh, no author wants to work with a publisher. No author really wants to be a part of an Amazon system. Again, that's the man in the middle that's grifting off all of us that might create something.
Yeah, look, the amazing thing I think about NFTs and this technology, because again, we call them NFT, whether it seems to mean different things, but this technology is how it's going to allow people with small niche audiences to monetize the hell out of it. Because when you're dealing in mass media, if somebody sells a song to 20 people for 0.1 ETH each, they make more money than if it gets played 1 million times on Spotify.
Crazy. If you go back and you look at some of the history of the 1970s, so it wasn't Jackson Browne, the Eagles, and Fleetwood Mac that got all the money for their music. It was David Geffen. I mean, it's true.
He had a good run.
I salute him for being the guy that figured it all out. But on the flip side, in the future, I would prefer that the artist that creates something wonderful gets compensated for it and controls it. To me, that seems like a better society.
Far better. That's the society I want to be a part of. At a macro level, when I talk about what is even crypto or Web3, for me, I really feel I was brought up in a culture of greed. And I was taught that the more I took for myself, the better. And that made a lot of sense because I like stuff and I was good at taking it. But it turns out that there are other cultures that are cultures of giving and cultures of generosity. And to me, that's what crypto is about. Because the more you give to the community, the more the community takes and multiplies it and gives it back.
You do a great job of outlining where we are, how we've got here, etc. Because look, as I start this conversation with you today, it's easy to look at the headlines. It's easy to look at the negativity. It's not to try to beat you over the head with it, but to bring it up. And you're very good at, okay, Mike, you just hit me over the head with that. But did you think about this? Did you think about that? You forgot this, Mike. I think it's a good type of conversation for people, especially when you get in the middle of a big downturn on a transformative technology, to not just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I really say that I try and spend my time preaching to the converted, because you're not going to teach people crypto. Rather than try and teach them, I try and motivate them to learn about it. I say that the three best return on time in my life, number one is putting on a helmet because I totaled 2 motorcycles. Number 2 is flossing my teeth because I've never had a cavity. It doesn't take much time. And number 3 is learning about crypto.
I want you to give where people, in your opinion, right now, learning about crypto, where should they go? Best resources.
Medium has a list of the top 50 Bitcoin bloggers. And if you go follow all of them, and there are new ones every week, there are 5 or 10 new ones. If you follow all of them, what you'll see is you will find people who write to you, because in some ways, this is infinite. When everybody sees it, I think everybody sees something a little bit differently, but there are people who see something closer to them. I think for people, it's about finding people that they can really relate to the way that they're talking about it. If you follow all these people on Medium, you spend just a little bit of time every day reading different folks and seeing who speaks to you. Hopefully, you'll find some folks who really can bring you along the path.
Any books you recommend, or just Medium's the best place to go right now?
For me, to get a history, because I personally like to understand who the players are and how they got to where they were. The book that did that for me was called Digital Gold, written by Nathaniel Popper. He was a New York Times, might still be tech writer. Then from a philosophical standpoint, it's a book called Sacred Economics that really goes very deeply into the philosophy of money. It's really opened my mind more than anything. When I saw the crypto line on June 29th, 2017, I described it for 3 months as it felt like I had blinders on and I didn't see all this world that was out there. And oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then after 3 months, I realized actually I had blinders on, but they didn't come off. They just opened up a tiny little bit. And Sacred Economics has helped open it up more than anything.
Lou, very cool stuff. Thank you for taking some time today. Hey, where can people go check you out and your clear thinking if they want to learn more and follow you? Where can they go? I'm sure on Twitter and all that fun stuff.
I post all my writings on Medium. I write for me because I don't know what I think of anything until I read what I've written about it. Again, to some people, I speak to them and that's great. And then at the bottom of that, if they want, I put out a newsletter where I started something called Crypto Mondays, which is the largest crypto meetup in the world. It's now in 48 cities. So I keep a list of all the cities so people can go check them out. They live there or traveling there.
I've spent a lot of my time in the last 10 years in Saigon, and there is I don't want to say significant, but there's some true believers that I've had a chance to sit in on some meetings. It's always very interesting for me.
The most penetrated country in the world.
For those that don't know why, they can do a quick Google and probably figure out why. Yeah.
I was just there after Token 2049 in Singapore, which was awesome. Crypto winters in the US. Go to Singapore. It was hopping. And after that, I went for the launch of Crypto Mondays in Saigon. It was packed. They had more than 200 people there, 200 awesome people.
Isn't that interesting, though? Here's Singapore. Most people there, they've got a little bit of extra cash. But the demand for crypto out of Singapore is a little interesting. That here they've got a fairly stable currency, easy to travel, perhaps the best passport in the world, but they are unlimited enthusiasm for crypto.
In my mind, because in 2019, when it was crypto winter in the US, I went to Asia 4 times, including Singapore, Taiwan, Shanghai, Tokyo. What I came away with was that it's 2 things at the same time. One, obviously China is less so now, but Singapore, very friendly regulatory environment. And number 2 is they're bigger speculators in Asia. That's why Macau is 6 times bigger than Vegas.
The strangest thing I ever saw when I went to Macau the first time, I think it was the Venetian. And I walked in, the biggest casino floor I've ever seen. You could have heard a pen drop. It was so serious.
That's so funny.
Unlike Vegas, where it's a party. In Macau, even if the odds are stacked against them, they're speculating and they want to make money in that casino.
It's still happening. And I think that's going to be, outside of there being major regulatory changes in Europe or the US, that's where most of the crypto innovation will come from. Companies will move there. Americans will move there. Dubai, all these countries are seeing an influx.
Hey, freedom's a nice thing if you can find it, right?
Well, interestingly, 2 of those 3 countries are, quote, benevolent dictatorships.
I would argue that every Asian country is a benevolent dictatorship, whether they're communist or democracy. It's all one party, essentially. The typical American that's never been there, there's all kinds of criticisms and this and that. But then if you go there and you live there and you're like, well, hold on, it's one party, benevolent dictator, as you say. and what's the quality of life, et cetera, et cetera. Just like you might not be able to convince people of crypto, I probably can't convince people of why living in Asia is a great idea.
Exactly. Look, you got to go there like anything else. That's why before I got into crypto, I was investing in tech companies founded by Israelis. And AIPAC is the strongest lobbying organization in the US. And that's because they get 2/3 of all incoming congressmen to fly to Israel on AIPAC's dollar. And to go to Israel, for most people, is to fall in love with it. Same thing with Asia. Go to Asia and it'll open your eyes to a world that's much different than our media and government tells us it is.
Absolutely. Lou, great stuff. I could hear a little bit in your voice, a bit like, oh man, do I have to answer that? Da, 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 da. But you're a trooper, man. You jump in.
I don't take it personally. I don't think I'm going to change anybody's mind, but I'm happy taking the time. And obviously, your questions were very thoughtful. If you have an audience who's just interested in opening up their minds, I think you're doing them a great service.
Lou, perhaps we'll catch up in the near future. Thank you again.
That'd be great. See you, Michael.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.